Banned from my sister's luxurious wedding for being a distraction, my Eiffel Tower shoot got 5 million views in 3 days because my sister Clara said I always needed attention. When I posted one photo wearing the navy blue dress she had previously approved, she uninvited me via text saying my doctor fiancé would overshadow hers who works in Dad's finance department, but forgot I'm a professional photographer with 800K followers. I posted the shoot I did in Paris at the exact time of her ceremony, showing my fiancé's surprise proposal at the Trocadero, and the video went viral when people discovered it was the same date. The top comment with 50K likes was, "Sister banned Cinderella, but she became a princess in Paris." The notification sound echoed through my Brooklyn apartment at exactly 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Clara's text message glowed on my phone screen with the kind of cold precision that could only come from someone who had practiced their cruelty. "Victoria, after careful consideration, we've decided to uninvite you from the wedding. Your constant need for attention and your fiancé's profession would create an uncomfortable dynamic. This is my day, and I won't let you ruin it like you ruin everything else. Don't bother responding." I read it 3 times, my hands trembling not from shock but from something else entirely. Rage, perhaps. Or maybe it was the crystalline clarity that comes when someone finally shows you exactly who they've always been. My fiancé Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway, his hospital scrub still on from his shift at Mount Sinai, his dark eyes narrowing as he watched my expression change. "What happened?" he asked, already moving toward me. I handed him my phone without speaking. Marcus was a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon, the kind of person who saved children's lives before breakfast, and somehow still remembered to pick up my favorite coffee on his way home. He was brilliant, kind, and devastatingly handsome in a way that made strangers do double takes on the subway. He was also apparently too threatening for my sister's wedding. Marcus's jaw tightened as he read the message. "She can't be serious." "Oh, she's serious." I took my phone back and scrolled up through our message history. There it was. The navy blue dress I'd posted to my Instagram story 2 weeks ago, carefully chosen after Clara sent me her approval in writing. Remember when she specifically told me to wear something elegant but understated? I showed her this exact dress. She said it was perfect. The post had received exactly 342 likes. Modest by my professional standards. I was a wedding and lifestyle photographer with 800,000 followers, built through years of work and artistic vision. That single, innocuous post of me in a dress, not even at an event, just a fitting, had been enough to trigger Clara's insecurity. "This is insane," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled in the way it got when he was truly angry. "We've already booked flights to Miami. The wedding is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I looked at the calendar on my wall, marked with Clara's wedding date circled in gold ink. September 15th. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. at some exclusive waterfront venue in Miami Beach that had cost my father $70,000. Clara had sent me 17 emails about the dress code, the itinerary, and the vision for her perfect day. She'd made me promise not to bring my professional camera, worried I'd make her hired photographer uncomfortable. I'd agreed to everything, and now this. She forgot something important. I said slowly, an idea crystallizing in my mind with dangerous precision. Marcus looked at me curiously. "What?" "I had that Paris shoot scheduled for September 10th through 18th. Remember? The luxury travel brand collaboration. I postponed it to make sure I could be at Clara's wedding." I opened my email app and found the thread with Dominique Laurent from Lumiere Travel. They were disappointed when I pushed the dates, but they said they'd work with my schedule. "You're going to reschedule? I'm going to take back my original dates." My fingers moved across the screen with newfound purpose. "And I'm going to document every single moment for my 800,000 followers." The apartment fell quiet except for the distant sound of sirens outside our window. Marcus sat down beside me on our vintage leather couch, the one we'd found at a flea market in Williamsburg and had reupholstered together during those early days of our relationship. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said carefully. I turned to face him, my mind already racing through compositions and lighting and angles. "Clara doesn't want me at her wedding because she's afraid I'll somehow steal her spotlight. She's always been like this, ever since we were kids. Everything is a competition she's already decided she needs to win." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd witnessed enough family dinners to understand the dynamic. Clara was 31, 3 years older than me, and had spent our entire lives positioned as the golden child. She'd married well, though not as well as she'd hoped, and now worked in marketing at our father's investment firm. Her fiancé, James Hartford, was perfectly nice in that bland corporate way. He worked in the same firm, reported to my father, and had the kind of ambition that meant he'd probably make partner eventually. But he wasn't saving children's lives. He wasn't featured in medical journals. He wasn't the subject of that New York Times profile about young surgeons revolutionizing pediatric cardiac care. "She's jealous of you and Marcus," I continued, speaking the truth we'd both known but never quite articulated. "Not of me specifically. She's never been jealous of my career, but Marcus represents something James isn't and will never be. Someone exceptional who chose me. So you're going to Paris." "I'm going to Paris," I confirmed, "and I'm going to document the most breathtakingly beautiful content of my entire career. September 15th at 4 p.m. Miami time is 10 p.m. Paris time. Perfect timing for evening shots at the Trocadero with the Eiffel Tower lit up behind me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his surgeon's hands folded together as he processed. Then a slow smile spread across his face, the kind that made him look dangerously like the teenager he must have been before medical school had aged him a decade. "I have that medical conference in London September 12th through 14th, he said thoughtfully. "I could extend my trip. Meet you in Paris on the 15th. My heart actually skipped. "Are you serious?" "Completely. We've been talking about going to Paris together for 2 years. This seems like the perfect opportunity." He paused, his smile widening. "I might even have something special planned." I stared at him, searching his expression for clues, but Marcus had a surgeon's perfect poker face when he wanted it. "Something special? You'll see." He kissed my forehead and stood up, stretching his tall frame. "But first, you should probably respond to Dominique about those dates. And maybe start planning your outfits. If you're going to make your sister regret uninviting you, you should probably look absolutely devastating while doing it." I pulled up Dominique's email, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. There was something poetic about this moment. Clara trying to diminish me, to control my narrative, only to hand me the perfect opportunity to create something she could never touch. "Dominique," I typed. "I can do the original September 10th 18 dates after all. Let's make this campaign unforgettable." The response came back within 10 minutes. Dominique was thrilled. The luxury travel brand wanted content that screamed elegance, romance, and aspiration. They wanted the Eiffel Tower at golden hour, intimate bistro moments, dawn over the Seine, the kind of imagery that made viewers immediately start planning their own Parisian adventures. They wanted exactly what I was about to give them. Over the next 3 days, I planned with the precision of a military operation. I coordinated with Dominique on locations, scheduled a local makeup artist and hairstylist, arranged for a designer to loan me 6 different haute couture pieces. I mapped out every shot, every angle, every moment that would translate to compelling content, and I told absolutely no one in my family. My phone rang constantly. My mother called 4 times trying to mediate. "Victoria, sweetie, Clara is just stressed about the wedding. You know how she gets. Maybe if you just apologized." "Apologized for what exactly?" I'd asked, my voice level. "For posting a photo of a dress she approved? For being engaged to someone she perceives as more successful than her fiancé? That's not fair, Victoria. None of this is fair, Mom. But I'm not going to beg to attend a wedding where I've been explicitly told I'm not wanted." My father called once, his voice carrying that disappointed tone he'd perfected over years of managing difficult clients. "This is family, Victoria. You're being childish." "No, Dad, Clara was being childish. I'm just responding accordingly." He'd hung up without another word. My younger brother Tyler was the only family member who seemed to understand. "She's always been threatened by you," he said during a FaceTime call, his face pixelated from his apartment in Seattle. "Remember her sweet 16? She cried for 3 hours because you won that photography contest the same week." I'd forgotten that detail, but it fit the pattern perfectly. Clara needed to be the center of attention, but only on her terms. She needed to be celebrated, but only in comparison to my supposed failures. She was about to learn a very expensive lesson about letting me out of her carefully controlled narrative. September 10th arrived with crisp New York fall weather that promised winter was coming. Marcus left for London that morning, kissing me goodbye at our apartment door with a mysterious smile that suggested he was hiding something significant. "See you in Paris," he murmured against my hair. "See you in Paris," I echoed, my camera bag already packed and waiting by the door. The flight to Charles de Gaulle was 8 hours of anticipation. I reviewed my shot list, organized my equipment, and carefully avoided every group chat and family text thread that was probably exploding with pre-wedding chaos. Paris welcomed me with September sunshine and that particular quality of light that made every photograph look like art. Dominique met me at the hotel, a boutique property in the 7th arrondissement with a view of the Eiffel Tower from my balcony. The room was an editorial spread waiting to happen. Crisp white linens, French doors, flowers in crystal vases. "You look ready for war," Dominique observed in her elegant accent, taking in my focused expression. "Something like that," I agreed. We spent the next 4 days shooting across Paris. The results were stunning even by my professional standards. Me in a crimson Valentino gown on the Pont Alexandre III at dawn, the Seine behind me like molten gold. A powder blue Dior dress at Jardin des Tuileries, surrounded by fall flowers. An architectural black suit at the Louvre Pyramid, all sharp lines and sophisticated elegance. Each shot was carefully crafted, meticulously lit, absolutely gorgeous. And I posted exactly none of them. I was waiting for September 15th. Marcus arrived on the morning of the 14th, bringing with him an energy that felt electric. He'd extended his London stay, he said, and had something important to discuss. But first, he wanted to enjoy Paris with me. We spent that day like tourists, walking through Montmartre, eating croissants at sidewalk cafes, kissing on random bridges like teenagers. Marcus kept checking his watch, his excitement barely contained, and I began to suspect what was coming. September 15th dawned clear and perfect. I spent the morning with the hair and makeup team, transforming into something ethereal. The designer delivered the pièce de résistance, a custom silk gown in midnight blue that seemed to capture starlight in its fabric. It was sophisticated, romantic, and utterly breathtaking. "You look like you're about to break the internet," Dominique said admiringly. "That's the plan." We arrived at the Trocadero at 8 p.m. Paris time, 2 p.m. in Miami, 2 hours before Clara's ceremony would begin. The Eiffel Tower rose behind us, majestic and golden in the early evening light. Tourists milled around, but we'd secured permission for our shoot area, creating a small bubble of professional space. Marcus appeared at 9:30 p.m., dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit that made him look like he'd walked off a magazine cover. He'd gotten a haircut, I noticed, and he was nervous. "Ready for the evening shots?" I asked innocently. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice catching slightly, "I was thinking we could adjust the plan a little." He moved to the center of our shooting area, the Eiffel Tower perfectly framed behind him. Dominique caught my eye and nodded, her camera already recording video. The photographer I'd hired for the brand content also started filming, understanding instinctively that something significant was happening. Marcus knelt down on one knee. The world stopped. "Victoria Elizabeth Hayes," he began, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. "I fell in love with you 3 years ago when you came to photograph the hospital gala and spent 20 minutes talking to a scared kid about camera angles instead of taking the pictures you were hired to shoot. I knew then that you were someone special, someone who saw people, really saw them, in a way most people never do." Around us, tourists had stopped to watch. A small crowd was forming, but I barely noticed. My entire focus was on Marcus, on his dark eyes filled with emotion, on the small velvet box he was pulling from his jacket pocket. "You make me want to be better every single day. You challenge me, inspire me, and somehow still laugh at my terrible jokes after 12-hour shifts. You're brilliant and kind and talented in ways that take my breath away." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the Eiffel Tower's light and seemed to hold entire galaxies within its stone. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." The crowd erupted in applause as Marcus slid the ring onto my finger and stood to kiss me. The photographer captured everything. The moment he knelt, my hand flying to my mouth, the tears streaming down my face, his arms lifting me off the ground as we kissed against the backdrop of the lit Eiffel Tower. It was perfect. It was magical. It was exactly 10 p.m. Paris time, which meant it was exactly 4 p.m. in Miami. Right when Clara would be walking down the aisle, Dominique was already editing on her laptop while the photographers transferred files with expert efficiency. The brand had pre-approved quick social posts, eager for real-time engagement. Within 20 minutes, we had the perfect sequence. The proposal video, the ring close-up with the Eiffel Tower behind it, Marcus and me kissing as newlyweds-to-be, surrounded by Parisian twilight. I opened my Instagram, my hands still shaking from adrenaline and joy. 800,000 followers were about to witness something real, something that had nothing to do with manufactured content or brand deals, and everything to do with actual love. The caption wrote itself, "She said yes, when you find someone who makes Paris even more beautiful." September 15th, 2024, a day I'll never forget. Just engaged. Chucked Paris proposal. Chuck Love in Paris. I posted it at 10:23 p.m. Paris time, 4:23 p.m. Miami time, 23 minutes after Clara's ceremony had officially begun. Then I did something that felt both petty and perfect. I turned off my phone. "What now?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we watched the Eiffel Tower sparkle with its hourly light show. "Now," I said, leaning back into his warmth. "We enjoy being engaged in the most romantic city in the world, and we let the internet do what it does best." We had dinner at a tiny bistro in the Marais, drank wine that tasted like bottled starlight, and walked along the Seine holding hands like we were the first two people who'd ever discovered Paris. My phone stayed off. For those few hours, Clara's wedding didn't exist. My family's drama didn't exist. There was only me and Marcus and the City of Lights. When we finally returned to the hotel at 2 a.m., exhausted and happy, I allowed myself to turn my phone back on. The notification count had stopped at 99999 plus. The post had gone viral. My phone's screen illuminated the darkened hotel room with an almost aggressive brightness. Marcus was already asleep, his arm draped across my waist, but I'd slipped out of bed to process what I was seeing. The numbers kept climbing even as I watched. 5. 2 million views on the proposal video. 847,000 likes on the main post. 23,000 comments and counting. But it wasn't just the numbers that made my heart race. It was the narrative that had formed without any input from me. The top comment, with 51,000 likes, read, "Wait, isn't this the same date as that Miami wedding drama? The photographer's sister who got uninvited? Iconic timing bestie." Someone had connected the dots, and they'd done it fast. I scrolled through my messages with mounting disbelief. My photographer colleagues were congratulating me, brand representatives were requesting collaboration meetings, wedding magazines wanted exclusive interviews, and buried among the professional accolades were hundreds of messages from people I'd never met, all saying variations of the same thing. They'd followed the story of my sister uninviting me, and this felt like poetic justice. Then I found Clara's messages, 17 of them, sent between 4:30 p.m. and midnight Miami time. I opened the thread with the kind of grim fascination normally reserved for watching storm systems on weather radar. "You absolute bitch! You did this on purpose. Everyone at my wedding is on their phones looking at your engagement, my wedding. Dad says you've embarrassed the entire family. Mom is crying. You've ruined everything. Everything. I hope you're happy." The messages devolved from there into increasingly incoherent rage. I should have felt guilty. Some part of me expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I hadn't known Marcus was going to propose. That part was genuine. The shock on my face in those photos was real. The tears were real. The joy was real. But I had known exactly when I would post it. I had planned for maximum impact. And the internet had done the rest, connecting pieces of a story I'd never explicitly told, but had carefully positioned for discovery. My brother Tyler's message was more measured. "Holy shit, Victoria. The wedding was chaos. Clara saw your post right before she walked down the aisle. She actually considered calling it off. Dad had to give her a talk in the bridal suite while 200 guests waited. She went through with it, but you could see she'd been crying. Half the guests spent the reception on Instagram instead of watching the first dance. It was brutal. Also, congratulations on the engagement. Marcus is a good guy." I typed back quickly, "Thanks. Tell me more tomorrow. Going to sleep." But I didn't sleep. I kept scrolling through the wreckage of Clara's perfect day, documented not by her expensive photographer, but by her guests' social media posts. There were photos of the venue, admittedly stunning, all white flowers and ocean views, but the captions told a different story. "Beautiful wedding, but the bride seemed really upset about something," with 342 likes. When your reception gets overshadowed by a proposal in Paris with 891 likes, someone had even created a side-by-side comparison, Clara's professional wedding photos next to my engagement shots, with the caption, "Same day, different energy." The comparison was devastating. Clara looked beautiful in her elaborate lace gown, but there was something tight around her eyes, something forced in her smile. Meanwhile, my photos radiated genuine joy, the kind you can't fake or manufacture. The internet had chosen its favorite, and it wasn't the $70,000 Miami wedding. By 3 a.m. Paris time, the story had migrated to TikTok. Someone had created a timeline video explaining the entire situation, the uninvited text, the postponed Paris trip, the perfectly timed engagement post. It had 3 million views and was climbing. The creator had used audio from a popular sound. And that's how you handle family drama, with class in Paris. I finally put the phone down and crawled back into bed next to Marcus. He stirred slightly, pulling me closer in his sleep. The ring on my finger caught moonlight from the window, sending rainbow prisms across the ceiling. This was real. This mattered. Clara's wounded pride and orchestrated perfect day didn't. Morning arrived with Parisian sunshine and Marcus bringing me coffee from the cafe downstairs. He'd somehow acquired fresh croissants and was looking disgustingly well-rested despite our late night. "So," he said carefully, handing me a coffee that was exactly the right temperature. "I'm assuming the internet found out?" I showed him my phone. His eyebrows climbed steadily higher as he scrolled through comments, views, and the absolute chaos that had erupted online. 5 million views, he said slowly. "Victoria, this is insane." "It's more than insane. It's nuclear." I took a sip of coffee and tried to organize my thoughts. Clara's wedding became a footnote to our engagement. Her perfect day got completely eclipsed, and she knows it's her own fault for uninviting me. Marcus set the phone down and looked at me with that steady surgeon's gaze that had first attracted me to him. "Are you okay with this? I know you're angry at Clara, but this is your family." My family uninvited me from a wedding because they were afraid I'd be a distraction. Then I became exactly the distraction they feared, but on a completely different stage. I met his eyes squarely. "Yes, I'm okay with it. Clara spent 3 weeks making sure everyone knew I wasn't important enough to attend her wedding. Now everyone knows I was in Paris getting engaged while she was walking down an aisle to a man who'll never be more than middle management in Dad's firm." He winced slightly. "That's harsh." Truth often is. We spent the morning walking through Le Marais, deliberately avoiding my phone and the digital wildfire spreading across multiple platforms. But by noon, my mother was calling. Then my father. Then Clara herself, her number appearing on my screen with such frequency it was almost comedic. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I took Marcus to Sainte-Chapelle, where 13th century stained glass created cathedral light that made everything feel sacred. We held hands in the quiet, surrounded by tourists and beauty, and I let the peace of the moment wash over me. Whatever chaos was happening in Miami, whatever fury my family was directing my way, couldn't touch this. But eventually, I had to engage. Dominique needed approval on the brand content we'd shot. My agent was fielding interview requests that were becoming impossible to ignore. And Tyler sent a message that actually made me pause. Dad cut Clara off financially. "She's losing her mind. You need to call Mom." I showed the message to Marcus at a cafe overlooking the Seine. He frowned, his coffee forgotten. "Cut her off how? Clara still lives in the apartment Dad owns. She drives a car he pays for. Her job is literally working for him." I felt a strange twist in my stomach that might have been the beginning of guilt. If he's serious about cutting her off, she loses everything. Because of your engagement post? Because she made the family look bad by causing drama at her own wedding. I remembered how my father operated. Appearances were everything. Business relationships were sacred, and emotional displays were weaknesses to be eliminated. Clara had a meltdown at her reception because guests were looking at their phones instead of watching her first dance. Dad probably saw it as unprofessional. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression troubled. "That seems extreme. That's Dad." I ordered another coffee and tried to organize my thoughts. Clara spent our entire childhood being positioned as the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect career path following Dad into finance. But she has this fundamental insecurity that makes her vicious when she feels threatened. And I apparently threaten her just by existing successfully outside Dad's control. The waiter brought my coffee and a small plate of madeleines I hadn't ordered. Marcus reached for one absently, his mind clearly working through the family dynamics he'd observed but never quite understood. "So, what do you do now?" he asked finally. "I finish my Paris shoot. I go home to New York. I start planning our actual wedding." I met his eyes firmly. And I let Clara deal with the consequences of her own choices. I didn't uninvite her from my engagement. I didn't send her cruel texts about being a distraction. I just lived my life and let the internet connect dots I never explicitly drew. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't quite that simple. I had timed that post with surgical precision. I had known exactly what would happen when I shared my engagement at the exact moment Clara was walking down her aisle. The spontaneity was real, but the timing was calculated, and I didn't regret it at all. That evening, as the Eiffel Tower's lights began their hourly sparkle show, I finally called my mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with tears I'd heard 1,000 times before. "Victoria, sweetheart, we need to talk about what happened." "What happened?" I said carefully. "Is that I got engaged? In Paris? To a man I love deeply, and I shared that joy with people who follow my career." "You shared it at the exact time of your sister's wedding ceremony." "I shared it when it happened, Mom. Marcus proposed at 10 p.m. Paris time. Was I supposed to wait? For how long? Until Clara's honeymoon was over? Until she felt sufficiently celebrated?" I kept my voice level but firm. She uninvited me because she was afraid I'd somehow steal her spotlight. So I wasn't at her wedding. I was in Paris living my life. That's what she wanted. "That's not fair, Victoria." "None of this has been fair from the beginning." I watched Marcus across the hotel room, unpacking our things with methodical care. Clara decided that my relationship, my career, and my presence were threats to her perfect day. She eliminated the threat. She doesn't get to be angry that I didn't pause my entire life to protect her feelings from 3,000 miles away. My mother was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Your father is very disappointed in both of you." "Both of us? What did I do besides get engaged?" "You embarrassed the family." Clara's wedding became a social media joke. "Do you know how many people at their reception were watching your proposal video instead of paying attention to her first dance?" That sounds like a Clara problem, not a me problem. I felt ice forming in my chest, the same protective freeze that had gotten me through childhood in a house where emotional displays were seen as manipulation. I didn't crash her wedding. I didn't send her nasty messages. I didn't uninvite her from major life events because I was insecure. I got engaged and shared it with my followers, exactly like I would have done if there was no family drama. But there is family drama, Victoria. There always has been with you too. There it was, the subtle accusation that I was somehow equally responsible for Clara's behavior toward me, that her cruelty and my response to it were equivalent problems requiring equal apologies. "I'm not apologizing," I said clearly, to anyone. If Clara wants to discuss why she uninvited me in the first place, I'm open to that conversation. Otherwise, I'm going to enjoy being engaged to an incredible man in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I ended the call before my mother could respond. Marcus looked up from folding his dress shirt with the precision only a surgeon could achieve. That sounded difficult. It was expected. I joined him on the bed, accepting the comfort of his arms around me. "My family has always positioned Clara as the victim of my existence. It's easier for them than acknowledging she's been competitive and cruel since we were children." He kissed the top of my head. "For what it's worth, I think your timing was perfect. Not petty. Just perfect." It was definitely a little petty, maybe, but she earned it. He pulled back to look at me seriously. "Victoria, I love your capacity for forgiveness and your desire to maintain family relationships. But some people don't want healing. They want control. And when you refuse to be controlled, they call it betrayal." His words settled over me with the weight of truth I'd been avoiding. Clara didn't want a relationship with me. She wanted an audience for her achievements and a scapegoat for her insecurities. I'd spent 28 years trying to be small enough, quiet enough, unsuccessful enough to avoid threatening her. And the moment I'd stopped trying, she'd shown her true face. The next morning brought another complication. My father called at 7 a.m. Paris time, his voice carrying the cold authority he used in boardrooms. "Victoria, we need to discuss your behavior." "Good morning, Dad. How was the wedding?" "Don't be glib. You know exactly what you did." He paused, and I could picture him in his home office, surrounded by mahogany and leather, and the trappings of success he'd built. "You deliberately posted your engagement during Clara's ceremony to humiliate her." "I posted my engagement when it happened. Marcus proposed at 10 p.m. our time. I shared the moment with my followers. The fact that it coincided with Clara's wedding is geography and time zones, not a conspiracy." "You're telling me you didn't know what time you were posting?" "I'm telling you that I was in Paris getting engaged while Clara had her wedding in Miami. She uninvited me, remember? She made it very clear I wasn't welcome. So I went to Paris instead and continued living my life." I kept my voice neutral, refusing to give him ammunition. If my happiness somehow diminished hers, that says more about her than it does about me. "Your sister is devastated. She's talking about divorce already because James is furious that their wedding became a laughingstock. The investors at the reception were all watching your video instead of networking. Do you understand what this means for business?" There it was, the real issue. Not Clara's feelings, but the business implications of family drama becoming public entertainment. "I understand that Clara made choices that led to consequences," I said firmly. "She chose to uninvite me. She chose to monitor her wedding guests' phones instead of enjoying her reception. She chose to have a meltdown in front of investors because she couldn't handle people caring about something other than her for 5 minutes. Those were her choices, Dad, not mine. You're being incredibly selfish. No, I'm being incredibly honest. And apparently, that's something this family can't handle. I felt Marcus's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. I'm going to finish my time in Paris and then return to New York. If Clara wants to have an actual conversation about why she felt threatened enough to uninvite me, I'm open to it. But I'm not apologizing for getting engaged, and I'm not apologizing for sharing my happiness with people who genuinely care about me. My father was silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Not angry, but calculating. You've built quite a following with your photography. Yes, I have. Through years of hard work and talent, and that engagement post has gotten remarkable traction. I saw the brand tags. Another pause. Perhaps we should discuss how this affects your professional opportunities. Some of our clients follow you, Victoria. They've been asking questions about the family drama. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. My father had connections throughout New York's luxury markets. Hotels, venues, lifestyle brands. If he wanted to make my professional life difficult, he could. Are you threatening to damage my career because I got engaged at the wrong time? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I'm suggesting that family loyalty should extend to business considerations, and that perhaps you should think more carefully about what you post publicly. I'll tell you what, Dad. You worry about managing Clara's marriage crisis and your business relationships. I'll worry about my career and my engagement, and we'll see who handles their responsibilities better. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking with suppressed rage, but underneath it was something colder and more determined. My father was used to controlling his children through financial pressure and professional manipulation. It had worked on Clara, who'd built her entire identity around his approval. But I'd spent years deliberately creating a career independent of his influence, and he'd just reminded me exactly why. Marcus wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. What do you need right now? I need to finish this Paris content and make it the best work of my career. I need to prove that I don't need my family's approval or connections to be successful. I turned in his arms to face him. And I need to show them that Clara wasn't the only one who could have a perfect wedding day. Ours is going to be even better. His smile was slow and genuine. I'm counting on it. The remaining days in Paris took on a different character, less about joy and more about strategy. I worked with Dominique to create content that was breathtaking in its execution. Every shot was crafted to tell a story of romance, success, and independence. The luxury brand was thrilled with the engagement announcement's organic virality and wanted to extend our collaboration. This is unprecedented reach, Dominique explained over lunch at a cafe in Saint-Germain. The combination of your existing followers and the wedding drama narrative has created something brands spend millions trying to manufacture. You're trending across 3 platforms simultaneously. I sipped my wine and considered the numbers she was showing me. The engagement post now had 8 million views. A TikTok breakdown of the family drama had hit 12 million. Instagram reels comparing my Paris content to Clara's wedding photos had collectively gained another 5 million views. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, with commenters dissecting everything from dress costs to emotional authenticity. There's been interview requests from 3 major morning shows, Dominique continued. They want to hear your side of the story. The producers are positioning it as inspiration for people dealing with toxic family dynamics. No interviews about family drama, I said immediately. That's not the brand I want to build, but it's driving your engagement rates to unprecedented levels. I know, and I'm grateful for the opportunity it's created, but I'm a photographer, not a reality TV personality. I set down my wine and met her eyes. I'll do interviews about the Paris content, about the proposal, about building a career in luxury photography. But I won't dissect my relationship with my sister for entertainment. Dominique nodded slowly. That's actually smart. Mystery and dignity keep people interested longer than exposing everything. But you need to address it somehow. The silence is creating speculation. She was right. In the absence of my direct commentary, others were filling the narrative void. Former high school classmates were giving interviews about our childhood relationship. Clara's friends were posting defensive threads defending her version of events. My mother had apparently called a family friend who then posted a lengthy explanation about 2 strong personalities who've always competed. The story was being written without me, and I needed to take control of the narrative before it solidified into something I couldn't reshape. That evening, Marcus and I walked along the Seine as sunset painted the river gold and rose. He'd been quiet all day, processing the escalating situation, with the methodical patience he brought to complex surgical cases. "I've been thinking about your father's call," he said finally. "The threat about damaging your career. He can try, but I've built relationships independently of him. My clients hire me because of my work, not my family connections. True, but he could still make things difficult." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face me, the Eiffel Tower rising behind him in the distance. "What if we accelerated our timeline?" "For what?" "For the wedding. For everything." His eyes were intense, the way they got when he'd made a decision in surgery and was committing fully to the path forward. "Your family is trying to control the narrative around your engagement. So let's give them something they can't control. An actual wedding that's so beautiful, so genuine, that it completely overshadows whatever drama they're trying to create." I stared at him. "You want to rush our wedding? I want to marry you. Whether that happens in 6 months or 6 weeks doesn't change anything about how I feel. But tactically, it might change everything about how your family perceives this situation." He took my hands. "Right now, they see your engagement as a performance, a calculated move to hurt Clara. What if we showed them it was real? What if we had a wedding so intimate and authentic that it couldn't be dismissed as social media strategy?" The idea settled over me with surprising appeal. A small wedding, carefully curated, focused on the people who actually supported us rather than the performance of family obligation. It would be the opposite of Clara's elaborate production, genuine instead of staged, meaningful instead of expensive. "Where?" I asked, already planning compositions in my mind. "Wherever you want. But maybe somewhere that matters to us, not to your father's business connections or your mother's social circle." I thought about all the places Marcus and I had explored together. The small coastal town in Maine where we'd spent a long weekend hiking and eating lobster rolls. The vineyard in upstate New York where we'd gotten snowed in and spent 3 days reading by a fireplace. The Brooklyn Botanical Garden where we'd had our first date, walking through cherry blossoms and talking until the security guards made us leave. "The Botanical Garden," I said suddenly. "Cherry blossom season in spring. Small ceremony, maybe 30 people maximum. Everyone we actually care about and no one we feel obligated to invite." Marcus's smile was radiant. "That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect." We spent the rest of our Paris trip planning, not just the wedding, but our strategy for returning to New York and facing whatever chaos awaited. I would post one final statement about the engagement, carefully worded to express joy without engaging with family drama. I would decline all interview requests that wanted to focus on Clara. And I would quietly begin wedding planning with a small, trusted team that understood the assignment. Create something so beautiful it couldn't be weaponized. The flight home was turbulent, both literally and metaphorically. Somewhere over the Atlantic, my phone's airplane mode barrier lifted and messages flooded in with aggressive urgency. Clara had posted a lengthy Instagram statement positioning herself as the victim of my calculated attack. My mother was requesting a family meeting to heal these wounds. Tyler sent a warning. "Dad's threatening to write you out of his will." "He's furious." Marcus read over my shoulder and frowned. "He's actually playing the inheritance card?" "It's the only leverage he thinks he has left." I deleted the messages without responding. But I've never wanted his money. Clara built her entire life around eventually inheriting his company and his assets. I built a career he can't touch or control. Writing me out of his will would hurt him more than it hurts me. It would prove I never needed him. When we landed at JFK, my brother was waiting at arrivals with his girlfriend. Tyler had flown in from Seattle specifically to intercept us, his expression a mix of concern and grim amusement. "You've created an absolute shitstorm," he said by way of greeting, pulling me into a hug. "It's amazing. Clara's on her honeymoon in Turks and Caicos and apparently spending the entire time fighting with James and monitoring social media. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Mom's been crying to everyone who will listen." "And how are you?" I asked, searching his face for judgment and finding only solidarity. "I'm proud of you. For the first time ever, you didn't shrink yourself to make Clara comfortable, and she can't handle it." He grabbed one of my bags and started walking toward the parking garage. "But you need to know. They're planning something. Dad's been in his office for 3 days with his lawyer. Clara's talking about suing you for intentional infliction of emotional distress." Marcus's hand tightened on mine. "She can't be serious." "She's desperate and humiliated. which makes her dangerous. Tyler loaded our bags into his rental car. And Dad's feeding her revenge fantasies because his business reputation took a hit. Apparently, 3 of his major clients think the family drama is tacky and are reconsidering their partnerships. This was worse than I'd anticipated. Clara's wounded pride was one thing, but my father's business interests were entirely different. He'd spent 40 years building his investment firm's reputation on stability, discretion, and upper-class respectability. A daughter's viral engagement overshadowing another daughter's society wedding was exactly the kind of messy personal life that made wealthy clients nervous. Let them sue, I said finally. I posted about my own engagement. There's no legal basis for a lawsuit. It's just intimidation. Yeah, but legal fees are expensive even when you win, and Dad has infinite resources to make this dragged out and painful. Tyler merged onto the expressway toward Manhattan, which is why you need your own lawyer. I already reached out to someone I know who specializes in family disputes and social media law. She wants to meet with you tomorrow. The meeting happened in a sleek law office in Midtown, all glass and steel and carefully neutral artwork. Rachel Mendez was in her 40s, sharply intelligent, and had apparently made a career out of protecting content creators from various legal threats. "Let me be clear," she said after reviewing the situation with methodical precision. "Your sister has no viable case. You're allowed to post about your own engagement. The timing is unfortunate for her, but not illegal. However, your father's business leverage is more concerning. If he has relationships with venues, vendors, or brands you work with, he could potentially interfere. How do I protect against that?" I asked. Documentation. Save every contract, every email, every message that could demonstrate your professional reputation was built independently of his connections. If he does try to damage your career, we need evidence that your clients hired you for your skills, not family relationships. Rachel pulled out a legal pad. I'd also recommend getting ahead of any narrative he might try to create. Right now, you're positioned as the wronged party who got engaged in Paris. That's sympathetic. Don't let them flip it to make you the villain who deliberately sabotaged a wedding. Marcus leaned forward. What about a restraining order? If they're harassing her, messages and calls from family members don't typically meet the legal threshold for harassment, unfortunately. But if there are threats, specific credible threats, that changes things. Rachel looked at me carefully. Have there been any direct threats? I thought about Clara's messages. The rage-filled texts had been cruel, but not threatening in a legal sense. My father's call had been manipulative, but carefully worded to avoid anything actionable. They were both too smart to give me actual ammunition. No direct threats, I admitted. Just emotional manipulation and business leverage. Then my advice is this. Live your life impeccably. Plan your wedding, continue your work, maintain professional standards. Let them create the drama while you remain above it. The more they escalate and the calmer you remain, the worse they look. Rachel smiled slightly. And from what I've seen of your Paris content, you're very good at controlling your public image. Keep doing that. I left the meeting feeling simultaneously empowered and exhausted. The months ahead would require constant vigilance, careful documentation, and the kind of strategic thinking that shouldn't be necessary within families. But Clara and my father had chosen this battlefield, and I was realizing I had more weapons than they'd anticipated. That evening, Marcus cooked dinner in our Brooklyn apartment while I finally went through all the messages I'd been avoiding. Among the family drama and interview requests was something unexpected. An email from the New York Times wedding section. They wanted to feature our engagement story, not the viral drama, but the genuine romance and Marcus's proposal planning. They were positioning it as part of a series on modern proposals that prioritized authenticity over Instagram aesthetics. "Marcus," I called into the kitchen, "the Times wants to interview us about the engagement." He appeared in the doorway, spatula in hand. "The newspaper that profiled me last year? The same. They want to focus on how you planned the proposal, and why Paris meant something to us specifically." I showed him the email. This could be really good positioning. Major publication, focusing on our relationship rather than family drama. But it would also make Clara even more furious. Clara's already furious. The question is whether we let her fury dictate our opportunities. I set down my phone and looked at him seriously. I don't want to build my life around avoiding her reactions. That's what I did for 28 years, and all it did was make her more controlling. If we're interesting enough for the Times to profile, we should do it. Marcus considered this, his surgeon's mind running through scenarios and outcomes. Okay, but we control the narrative. We talk about our relationship, our careers, the proposal. We don't mention the wedding drama unless they bring it up, and then we're diplomatic. The interview happened a week later at a cafe in Dumbo, with the Brooklyn Bridge creating perfect backdrop through the windows. The journalist, Amanda Chen, was professional and focused primarily on our relationship timeline and Marcus's proposal planning. She asked thoughtful questions about balancing demanding careers with personal life, about choosing Paris specifically, about our vision for marriage. "I have to ask," she said near the end, her voice gentle but probing. "There's been some speculation online about the timing of your engagement coinciding with your sister's wedding. Any comment on that?" Marcus and I had prepared for this question. We'd practiced the answer until it felt natural rather than rehearsed. "Family dynamics are complicated," I said carefully, "but what happened in Paris was genuine. Marcus proposed when the moment felt right to him. I shared our joy with people who've supported my work for years. The timing was coincidental, but the happiness was real." "Your sister had uninvited you from her wedding, correct?" "She made choices about her guest list. I made choices about how to spend that weekend. Both of us have to live with those decisions." I kept my voice neutral, fact-stating rather than emotional. But this story isn't about family drama. It's about two people who found each other and are building a life together. That's what matters. Amanda seemed satisfied with this response. The interview concluded with photos of us at the cafe, Marcus's arm around my shoulders, both of us genuinely relaxed and happy in a way that couldn't be faked. The article published 2 weeks later, timed perfectly with our wedding planning announcement. The Times had positioned it beautifully. "Love in the age of social media, how a surgeon's Paris proposal went viral." The focus was on authenticity, on Marcus's months of planning to make the proposal meaningful, on our decision to have a small wedding focused on intimacy rather than spectacle. The comments section was overwhelmingly positive, with readers appreciating the contrast between genuine romance and performative celebrations. Several mentioned Clara's wedding, only to note that our engagement seemed more joyful despite being simpler. The narrative was solidifying exactly as I'd hoped. We were the authentic love story, not the calculated social media play. But Clara wasn't done fighting. 3 days after the Times article, she launched her own media campaign. She gave an exclusive interview to a society website known for covering New York's wealthy families, positioning herself as the victim of a cruel sister's vindictive timing. She claimed I'd always been jealous of her success, that I'd deliberately scheduled the Paris trip to overshadow her wedding, that our family was devastated by my betrayal. The interview included photos from her wedding, professionally shot, expertly lit, undeniably expensive. She looked beautiful in her gown, James looked handsome in his tuxedo, the venue was stunning. But something about the images felt hollow, like looking at a perfectly decorated cake that tasted like cardboard. The interview's comments section was more divided than she'd probably hoped. Many readers sympathized with her ruined wedding, but others pointed out that she'd uninvited me first. The debate created exactly the kind of public examination of our family dynamics that should have embarrassed my father, but instead seemed to energize him. He called that evening, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You've turned our family into a public spectacle." "No, Dad." Clara gave an interview positioning herself as a victim. "I simply lived my life and responded to opportunities." I was in my apartment, surrounded by wedding planning materials and feeling strangely calm. If she didn't want public opinion, she shouldn't have invited it. "This ends now. You will both sit down with a family mediator and resolve this situation privately." I'm not sitting down with someone Clara has already poisoned against me. If she wants to talk, we can talk directly. But I'm not participating in a performance designed to make me apologize for getting engaged. "Then you leave me no choice." His voice carried a finality that made my stomach drop. "I'm removing you from all family business considerations. You're no longer listed as an emergency contact for company matters. And I'm making it clear to all my professional contacts that you don't represent this family's interests." The threat was meant to devastate me. Instead, I felt something close to relief. "Okay," I said simply, "if that's what you need to do." The silence on the other end suggested he'd expected more resistance, more emotional pleading. When he spoke again, he sounded almost uncertain. "You're fine with this?" "Dad, I've spent my entire adult life building a career that doesn't depend on your approval or your connections. You cutting me off from family business just makes official what's already been true for years." I kept my voice steady. "I don't need your money, I don't need your professional network. And I definitely don't need to be part of a family that treats relationships like business transactions. You're making a mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. I glanced at Marcus, who was watching with supportive concern. Is there anything else? Because I have a wedding to plan. He hung up without responding. Marcus immediately wrapped me in his arms, and I let myself lean into his strength. You okay? He murmured. Better than okay. I'm free. The next 3 months became a study in contrasts. While Clara and my parents maintained radio silence, a punishment that felt more like liberation, Marcus and I planned a wedding that was everything their Miami production wasn't. Intimate, meaningful, and completely under our control. We chose early April for cherry blossom season, when the Brooklyn Botanical Garden would be at its most ethereal. The guest list was deliberately small, 32 people who genuinely knew and supported us. Tyler was flying in from Seattle. Marcus's parents were coming from Chicago along with his brother. My college roommate was serving as my maid of honor. Dr. Nguyen from the hospital would officiate. She'd gotten ordained specifically for this purpose after Marcus asked her during a late-night shift. Not invited. My parents, Clara, or anyone from my father's business circle. The decision felt both terrifying and necessary. You're sure about this? Marcus asked one evening as we addressed invitations in our apartment. Once these go out, there's no walking it back. I'm sure they've made it clear that loving them requires diminishing myself. I'm done doing that. I sealed another envelope with more force than necessary. If they can't celebrate our happiness without controlling it, they don't get to be part of it. The wedding invitations created an immediate crisis. My mother called within hours of receiving hers. Or rather, not receiving one. Victoria, there must be a mistake. I didn't get an invitation. There's no mistake, Mom. You're not invited. The silence was deafening. Then, you can't be serious. I'm your mother. You're the mother who prioritized Clara's feelings over mine for 28 years, who called me selfish for getting engaged, who participated in Dad's threats against my career. My voice was steady, clinical. You chose sides. Now you live with that choice. She hung up crying. My father's response came through his lawyer. A formal letter suggesting that excluding them from the wedding could be construed as elder abuse and might have legal ramifications. Rachel Mendez laughed when she read it. This is desperation, she said. They have no legal standing. You're an adult planning your own wedding. But Clara's response was more calculated. She launched a social media campaign positioning herself as the bigger person, posting about forgiveness and family bonds. Despite everything, I still love my sister and hope she finds peace, she wrote, accompanied by a throwback photo of us as children. The post got 40,000 likes. The comments were predictably divided. Half praised Clara's maturity. The other half called it performative manipulation, but the narrative was shifting slightly in her favor. The scorned sister trying to reconcile while I remained cold and distant. Let her have it, Marcus said when I showed him the post. In 2 months, we'll be married in the most beautiful ceremony surrounded by people who actually love us. That's the only response that matters. He was right. I stopped checking Clara's social media, stopped reading comments dissecting our relationship, stopped engaging with the digital battleground entirely. Instead, I focused on creating something real. The wedding took shape like a perfect photograph slowly developing. Cherry blossoms in soft pink against blue sky. String quartet playing Vivaldi. 32 people who cried during our vows because they knew what we'd overcome to get there. Marcus in a tailored navy suit that made his eyes look like midnight. Me in a simple silk gown that caught light like water. Dr. Nguyen's ceremony was perfect. Marriage isn't about finding someone to complete you, but someone who accepts you completely. Victoria and Marcus have chosen each other not despite their challenges, but through them. That's the strongest foundation imaginable. When Marcus kissed me under the cherry blossoms, the small crowd erupted in genuine joy. Tyler was crying. Marcus's mother was crying. Even our photographer was crying, though she kept shooting through tears. The reception was intimate dinner at a Brooklyn restaurant, all exposed brick and candlelight and laughter that echoed off stone walls. No formal toasts, just people sharing stories about us. No first dance performance, just us swaying to jazz while our friends talked and ate and celebrated authentically. At some point during dessert, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was a photo of Clara's divorce filing. The caption read, "Thought you'd want to know your sister's marriage lasted exactly 4 months. James left her for someone from his office. Congratulations on destroying her life." I showed Marcus, expecting to feel something: guilt, satisfaction, concern. Instead, I felt nothing but distant pity. "That's not your fault," he said immediately. "I know. Her marriage failed because she built it on performance and insecurity, not love." I deleted the message. just like everything else in her life. The news about Clara's divorce spread through family channels rapidly. Tyler called the next morning with details. James had been having an affair for months, apparently started before the wedding. Clara had discovered emails and confronted him. The fight had been spectacular, ending with James moving out and Clara having a complete breakdown at our parents' house. Mom thinks you should reach out, Tyler said carefully. She's saying Clara needs family right now. Clara had family. She chose to alienate me when I didn't serve her purposes. I was packing for our honeymoon to Japan, carefully folding kimonos we'd purchased. Her marriage falling apart isn't my responsibility to fix. That's cold, Victoria. No, it's boundaried. There's a difference. I paused in my packing. Tyler, Clara has spent 3 decades using family as a weapon. Conditional love, strategic alliances, performative loyalty. I'm not playing that game anymore. If she wants a relationship with me, she can start by acknowledging what she did. Until then, her problems are her own. The truth was harder than I made it sound. Part of me, the little sister who'd once worshipped Clara, wanted to reach out, to comfort, to fix things like I'd always tried to do. But I'd learned something crucial. You can't save people who are drowning if they're determined to pull you under with them. Clara's public breakdown was spectacular and very much documented. She posted long Instagram captions about betrayal, about men being trash, about family being all that matters. She never mentioned my name, but the subtext was clear. I should have been there for her, and my absence proved my cruelty. Our honeymoon in Kyoto provided perfect distance from the drama. Marcus and I explored temples and gardens, ate incredible food, and took photographs that had nothing to do with family warfare. When we posted content, it was purely about travel and culture and the joy of being newlyweds discovering Japan together. The engagement on those posts was massive. My followers had grown to 2 million during the family drama, and they stayed for the authentic content. Brands were reaching out constantly. The Paris luxury campaign had led to partnerships with hotels, airlines, and fashion houses. My career was thriving precisely because I'd refused to be controlled. 6 weeks after our wedding, I received a letter. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered to our apartment. Clara's handwriting on expensive stationery. Victoria, I know you probably won't read this, but I need to try. You were right about James. You were right about the wedding being performance. You were right about everything. And I was too proud and scared to admit it. I spent our entire lives competing with you because Mom and Dad positioned us as rivals instead of sisters. When you started succeeding without their approval, it broke something in my understanding of how our family worked. I lashed out because I didn't know how else to process that you'd found freedom I couldn't imagine. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. How much I hurt you, how wrong I was. I'm in therapy. Really in therapy, not the kind Dad pays for to make appearances look good. I'm trying to understand why I became someone who could watch you be excluded and feel justified in it. I hope someday we can talk. But I understand if that day never comes. Clara. I read it 3 times, sitting on our apartment floor while Marcus was at the hospital. The letter felt genuine in a way Clara's social media posts never had. Vulnerable, specific, accountable. But I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. I put the letter in a drawer and went back to editing photos from Japan. 18 months after my engagement went viral, I stood in a gallery in Chelsea at the opening of my first solo photography exhibition. The series was called Chosen Family. Intimate portraits of the people who'd supported Marcus and me through the chaos. Tyler laughing over coffee, Marcus's mother crying at our wedding, Dr. Nguyen in her surgical scrubs, the friends who'd shown up when blood relatives hadn't. The gallery was packed. Press coverage had been significant. The New York Times art section, several photography magazines, a feature on NPR about artists who transform personal pain into universal truth. The exhibition was selling well, with several pieces already acquired by museums. My parents weren't there. Clara wasn't there. And I didn't miss them. What I had instead was a career I'd built through talent and determination, a marriage based on genuine partnership, and a life I'd constructed entirely on my own terms. The viral engagement post had opened doors, but I'd walked through them myself. Tyler found me near the centerpiece photograph, Marcus proposing at the Trocadero, the Eiffel Tower glowing behind us, my face captured in that moment of pure, unscripted joy. This is incredible, Victoria. Really incredible. He hugged me tightly. Mom and Dad don't know what they're missing. Yes, they do. That's why they're not here. I smiled at a couple admiring the portraits. They know that being here would mean acknowledging I succeeded without them. And that's too threatening to their narrative. Clara came by earlier, Tyler said carefully, before the official opening. Security wouldn't let her in without an invitation. My stomach tightened. What did she want? To see the exhibition, to talk to you. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text. She asked me to give you this. The message was simple. Your work is beautiful. I'm proud of you. I understand why I'm not invited. Clara. I looked at the text for a long moment, feeling nothing but a distant acknowledgement. Maybe someday we'd talk. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear her apology in person. But that day wasn't today, and might never come. Tell her thank you, I said finally, and that I hope therapy is helping her. Marcus appeared through the crowd, 2 glasses of champagne in hand, and pride radiating from every pore. The gallery director says 3 more pieces just sold, including the one of our wedding kiss. We toasted quietly amidst the celebration, 2 people who'd refused to shrink themselves for others' comfort. The viral engagement post that had started this journey was now just one moment in a much larger story, a story about choosing yourself, setting boundaries, and building a life so authentic that no amount of family manipulation could diminish it. My phone buzzed with another notification. 5 million views on my latest Instagram post. A behind-the-scenes video of the exhibition setup. In the comments, someone had written, "Remember when her sister said she always needed attention? Turns out she just deserved it." I smiled and put the phone away. Clara could have her narrative. I had mine. And mine was magnificent.